Yanni, if you'd open us in prayer.
Father God, we thank you, God, for this study. We're asking, God, for your anointing upon it, God. We give the pastor wisdom as he teaches us, God. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Praise the Lord. I want to welcome you out to our Sunday school as we continue on in growing graceful in the seasons of life. And life is a river. It flows. It's not a Kodak moment. It's not going to be, this is what it is forever. Things in life change. And so we have been looking at, from being a young person, not wasting your youth in foolishness and sin, to getting married, to having children, to having teenagers. And now we want to look at, as we get older, I've simply called this empty nesters, but it is the thought of getting old. And next week we're going to look kind of at the conclusion of things that you need to do to prepare in life. Because there are certain areas of life you need to prepare for, like you need a will. You need life insurance. But I'm only 30. You need these. And so we're going to talk about those next week. But this week I want to talk to you about one of the great, well, let's get our main text and we'll go from there. I'm going to give out a number of scriptures. I need Psalms 90 verses 10 through 12. Jeremy, this is our main text. Ecclesiastes 9:9. Carrie. Proverbs 5:15 through 19. Steph Walton. Yeah, let's get there and then we'll look at the four areas. All right, so let's talk about this, our main text, Psalms 90, verses 10 through 12. And so here is our text that we may gain a heart of wisdom, or literally grow in wisdom. That life is a flow and that we have to be wise in the season that we are in. That's critical to understand, because what you could do when you were 30 is not probably going to work when you're 60. There's just the reality there of what, life changes and circumstances change. That's a reality that you have to face, and we have to function and grow as mature people. And so last week we looked at teenagers. We looked at when raising teenagers, that's always important, and how that's different than children. You're teaching your young children. Teenagers, you better be ready to judge their bad behavior. And that's a transition that people struggle with. And that's why all of a sudden they're real sweet when they're 12, but mom and dad won't deal with the bad attitudes and the bad behavior, and they cover the sin, and then they blow up at 17 and everybody's going, what happened? But that's the way it is. And so there is a time where all the children will be done. You'll be done with children. This may be early in your life, in your 40s. My wife and I became empty nesters at 40, 42, 43? Something like that. And so that was young. But there's some that this may be later in life. That's not in, but it's going to happen. And so in the problem that people face in empty nesters is that when all the kids are gone, they realize they don't know the spouse they're married to. They've been busy in projects and in events and in their children that now they're just now it's just the two of them, the husband and the wife. And now they don't have kids to hide behind. They don't have events just going on all the time. It's now just the two of them in the house. That is a major transition for a lot of people that some don't handle well because they've hidden all their problems or a lack of communication or whatever that we're going to talk about in just a moment. But that becomes a major problem in marriage and in life. And you have to be able to handle and adjust to what some call the golden years. And yet others find it as not so golden. I don't know how else to describe it. So the first thing you have to realize is even when you have children, you have to invest in your marriage. That you can get so wrapped up in all the events of the children and all that's involved there that you begin to miss the investment that you need to make in each other. Ecclesiastes 9 and verse 9.
Live joyfully with the wife whom you love all the days of your vain life, which he has given you under the sun. All your days of vanity, for that is your portion in life and in the labor which you perform under the sun. Or
as Ecclesiastes says, in the New Living Translation, the wife God gives you is your reward. It's your reward. Marriage is the reward of intimacy in life. That's why it's your most critical relationship, second only to your relationship with God. And so couples get busy and they have children and they have more children and life gets busy around the children. And that's not always wrong. What is wrong is when you lose your relationship with your spouse in the children years. Then you come out on the other side and you're living with a stranger. And that's not healthy. Because your children are going to leave. Now, all I have to do is ask you, how excited were you to get out of your parents' house? Why would your children then be any different? There comes the point where they want to spread their wings. They want to go on in life. They want to move on. They don't want to be cramped. Now, the other flip side of this is the 30-year-old creature that lives in the basement, plays video games, and gets it made because mom and dad do everything for them. Pay their bills. They're not responsible for bills. They're not responsible for I think it was Italy was offering like 1,400 euros if a single man would move out of between the ages of 25 and 31, if they would move out of their parents' house, the Italian government would give them. And this is one of the reasons why they won't get married. So the birth rate in Europe, especially in Italy, is declining. And so that's a whole nother issue. But in life, you've got to invest in your marriage. Despite the children, despite the demands of life, to invest. Proverbs 5, 15 through 19.
Drink water from your own cistern and running water from your own well. Should your fountains be dispersed abroad, streams of water in the streets, let them be only your own and not for strangers with you. Let your fountain be blessed, and rejoice with the wife of your youth. As a loving deer and a graceful doe, let her breast satisfy you with all times, and always be enraptured with her love.
So the Bible's very real very honest, but a misunderstanding is, the saying here is invest in your marriage. Invest in your relationship. This is wise living. Because you get a couple of kids, you get some, and it gets busy. It gets really busy really quick. And there's pressures, there's financial pressures, there's time pressures, there's all sorts of pressures that can come on a life. And you get so busy, you can lose each other. You become glorified roommates. Marriage is to be far more than just roommates. The other issue is that people then just ignore the problems because they can hide behind the kids. And because they can hide and they can put off and kick things down the road, they aren't dealing with it. It's kind of like our national debt. Each president, each Senate just kicks it a little further down the road. Oh, we'll deal with this problem later, and that day will come. And so it's very important to realize that you can't just hide in your marriage. You're going to grow wise in life. You can't just hide from the problems of your marriage, the problems, the issues of marriage. Because by this point in marriage, you're going to have gone through some failures and setbacks, even some sin. That's going to be a reality at this point. You're going to be married 20 plus years now. You're going to be dealing with things like that. It's not just dirty socks left on the bathroom floor. There's going to be the real issues that you deal with in life. There's going to be disappointments. You're going to think you were on the same page and find out you weren't. There's going to be financial reversals. There's going to be personality changes. It's amazing how we can justify our own and not like it in other people. Especially when it comes to our spouse. These are challenges that you can hide behind in busyness of life and not deal with. And once you're an empty nester. And I've counseled couples where it's like they spent years hiding behind the kids, and now the kids are all gone and all their, one particular couple in Prescott, when I was there, I counseled, and Pastor Greg was so pleased in the change in their lives. And they had done this. They had 4 kids. They had spent years hiding behind the issues of the kids. Now the kids were grown, and all of these lack of investment was coming up and showing itself through their relationship. And so this is why this one is very important, because you will get there someday. And if you wait till that problem to fix it, then you're going to have some major problems. How many know it's easier to change the oil and maintain the car than to replace the engine? So it's just simple maintenance. And so any questions at this point? We're going to look at 4 areas that I believe are critical. It's not an inclusive list. There are probably other areas, but these are 4 major. Carrie?
More of a comment. I remember my parents had 6 kids, and but there's 19 years between the oldest and the youngest, so they had kids in the house for a long time, 38 years. And when my youngest sister was going off to college, I had heard, kind of these horror stories about, empty nesters and, the problems they would go through. So I called my parents. They were living in Florida then. I'm like, hey, how are you? Are you guys doing okay? And my mom just starts laughing. And my dad's in the background. He's like, what? She's like, she wants to know if we're okay being empty nesters. And they're laughing hysterically. They were having so much fun, you know? And so, but it was because they had invested in their relationship.
So this is critical, right? It's very, very important. All right, so let's get a few more scripture. I need Ephesians 4, verse 29. Jeremy? Proverbs 14 and verse 1. Carrie? 1 Peter 3, 8 and 9. Anyone? Amy? Thank you. Colossians 4 and verse 6. Sawyer? Proverbs 5 and verse 15. Cobra. And Ephesians 4, 31 and 32. We get that. Mike. Okay. So let's come on. Let's talk about 4 areas that need to be kept alive while you have the children in the home and after they leave. Very important areas. One is communication. You have to talk. It is good while you even have young children before they leave that you set time aside to talk. Adult conversation time. And so, you know, it's one thing to have conversations in front of the kids and with the kids and, you know, and discussing, you know, events coming up and schedule. But it's another just to spend time and talk. I think I've shared before, but when I was getting married, when we were getting married, it got busy. Life was busy in the church. We were busy planning. There was just busyness everywhere. And so we had a couple of blizzards when the year we got married. We got married in March. And so in February, sometime in February, we had gotten a blizzard. I remember parking my car. I got it at the end of the driveway. And when I went out, the snowplows had literally covered the roof of the car. We had gotten that much snow. It was not that we got that much snow, but we had gotten covered. We lived in a basement apartment, and they had dug out a door. And when I opened the door, the drift was 5 feet, like I'm looking at the snow. When I first started shoveling, I was bringing it into the shower and dumping it there to melt. I had gone outside, got my pants soaking wet in the snow by the time I got it to a point where I could just throw it to the side. Went back inside, changed my pants, came back out, closed the door, and immediately realized that I had left the key to the apartment in the other pants. And so Carrie had a key, but the roads were... So I called her anyway. Long story short, she came over, and we actually had time to talk. And we hadn't had this time. It was always doing something, being involved in an outreach or ministry or some kind of thing like that, being involved in this, going here, you know, being with other people, whatever it was. And I remember when she left, thinking, that's why I want to marry that girl. Yes, she's drop dead gorgeous, but that's why I want to marry that girl. That we had communication. You have to keep communication alive, because when the kids are gone, small chit-chat isn't going to be enough. Ephesians 4, verse 29.
Let no corrupt word proceed out of your mouth, but what is good for necessary edification, that it may impart grace to the hearers.
That should be true, especially in marriage. That we impart, that we don't use just abuse. You dumb, stupid, ignorant. You always. You know, when people use the superlatives, the always and nevers, He always, she never. You already know that's not true. So you're already on losing ground there, right? That accusation, foul language, like, don't you want to be happy? So put it away. Build up, encourage. There's ways of bringing difficult issues to the table without being snitty about it. And this is critical in marriage. Proverbs 14 and verse 1.
The wise woman builds her house, but the foolish pulls it down with her hands.
Okay, and so you have to work to build each other up. This is especially true of women. Let me just say this. The wife has the power to destroy a man or build him up like no one else does. As a wife, you have the power, and that's going to be mostly in your words. You have the power like no one else on planet Earth in his life to be able to speak words of encouragement or words of disaster, or tear him down. And it's literally the picture of the guy sitting on or the woman sitting on a branch, cutting it off, but she's sitting on the wrong side. When she's finished cutting it off, she's going to fall. That's the picture there of this. You have to keep communication alive. And so I would recommend two things. One is that you set time aside. Maybe it's after the kids go to bed, whatever, that you're putting that in now. If you are empty nesters now, that you take time and you just make sure that there's time to talk. The second I would say is, date nights are not always a bad thing. Just to spend time together. They don't have to be expensive. They don't have to be, the 7-course, $2,000 a night dinner kind of thing. They can be a relatively, easy thing to do. You go get an ice cream cone or whatever, just whatever. But spend time and invest. Long-term marriage. This is about living wise. Another area I believe is important is related to this, but it's also goes beyond just the words we use, is the area of kindness in a marriage. 1 Peter 3, 1 through 7. Peter is talking about marriage. You can read that in its context. First he's speaking to the wives, and then he speaks to the husbands. And then in verse 8, listen to what he says. Verse 8, 1 Peter 3, 8 and 9.
Finally, all of you, be like-minded, be sympathetic, love one another, be compassionate and humble. Do not repay evil with evil or insult with insult. On the contrary, repay evil with blessing, because to this you were called, so that you may inherit a blessing.
Now, some would say this is to the Church of Jesus Christ in general, and it definitely has that merit. But in the context of what Peter is writing, he's writing in the context of marriage. First he talks to the wives, and he talks to the husband, and then he says, and all of you, both of you, be sympathetic, be tender-hearted, be humble. Don't retaliate insult for insult. I've talked to couples that have called me, they're in the middle of a major argument, and I'll be asking them the question, what did it start over? And they'll say, I don't remember. How did the war start? I don't remember. But man, I'm mad. And this is, you're like, whoa, what happened to be kind to one another? This is the blessing God wants to give you. Growing wise in life. Colossians 4 and verse 6.
Let your conversation be always full of grace, seasoned with salt, so that you may know how to answer everyone.
So again, seasoned with salt, be attractive is what the The New Living Translation says that it's tasty. It's the picture there that you want to make your conversation kind, building up. And so this is very, very important. Another area, we're just going to touch on this, but it has to be, life changes. One of the areas that will change is physical. But that doesn't mean that it has to destroy any kind of intimacy, physical intimacy in your marriage. Proverbs 5:15, we read the whole context. I'm just going to read the first verse.
Drink water from your own well. Share your love only with your wife.
Share your love only with your wife. I've mentioned before that the physical intimacy of marriage is what separates marriage from any other relationship. Right? I can go to lunch with my wife. I can go to lunch with, I understand if I'm taking a woman to lunch, that's kind of weird. But I can play a game with my wife. I can play a game with someone else. I can, talk to my wife. I can talk to someone. But that area is exclusive in marriage. Exclusive for marriage. And so in that you have to learn each other. Life changes. Physically, life changes. Men's desire can, when they're younger, that's going to be different than when you're older. But that doesn't mean it's not as important when you're older. It just means it changes. It's going to change for her. There's all sorts of physical changes. And, menopause and all of this kind of thing can change different things and such. But rejection in this area diminishes a marriage. It says, you're not that important to me. It absolutely can damage long term. I understand I'm not tonight, dear, I have a headache kind of line. I get it. But if that becomes your mantra, you are ruining your marriage. You are destroying what God has based that intimate relationship that, like I said, everything else you pretty much do, and I get there's balances, and I've read that in a book, and I'm like, he, balanced it very well. There is a reality there, but that secret garden, if you will, that is for you and your spouse to share and share alone is just for you. You have to keep it alive. And so you have to understand the limitations that may be there. You also have to understand the need that is there. And if you reject your spouse, you'll diminish the value of your marriage. And that's why you have to invest in that area. It's critical. It's wise. And so that can be a number of ways, and again, this is not necessarily the forum to go into all of those. But it is worth mentioning here that this has to be part of your wise understanding of long-term marriage. Final area I think that is critical is forgiveness. Ephesians 4:31 through 32.
Let all bitterness and wrath and anger and clamor and evil speaking be put away from you with all malice. And be ye kind to one another, tender-hearted, forgiving one another, even as God, for Christ's sakes, have forgiven you.
I've read the statistic of the man who could listen to a marriage, just listen to a conversation that a husband and wife would have, and within 95% accuracy, after listening to them for 5 minutes, tell you if they'll be divorced in 5 years. One of the great problems now in a long-term marriage is resentment. Hurts. And these can run deep. This is why, go back to the last point I made, why adultery stings so deep. Because that was supposed to be just for us, and you took it outside. That's why it stings deep. You took it away from what was supposed to be mine, and you gave it to somebody else. That's why that stings deep. But even you can recover from that. You can recover and forgive and go on. It's not going to be hard for anyone to figure out. We got some newlyweds here. I'm going to have to break it. You're going to offend each other. It's going to happen. Maybe you haven't yet, but it's going to happen. It's just the reality of life. Especially when you live together. You're that close together. There's going to be times you really do need to take a shower. I know you like the way you smell, but you really do need to take a shower. Right? There's going to be times you're going to offend. You're going to have to forgive. You're going to have to literally put it away. Literally throw it away. Get rid of. What the New Living Translation, get rid of. Like next week, they're gone. By Saturday, they're going to be totally moved out. And we don't have to deal with strollers in the hallway and all that kind of stuff. And then we're going to get rid of a lot of stuff. We're going to start replacing other things, but we're going to get rid. That's the picture here. Get rid of your anger. Get rid of your bitterness. Get rid of your clamor. There's your ABCs to get rid of: anger, bitterness, and clamor. Get rid of those and be kind, tender-hearted. Again, that's a Christian stance towards people in general, but should be absolutely amplified in the house. And when the kids are gone, you might be able to hide behind some of the issues there. Pastor Campbell one time said, he gets a call the day after graduation of high school from a man who said, "My wife's leaving me, I don't understand." And her response were, we've had kids now for how many ever years they had kids, and I don't know him, so I'm leaving. This happens even to Christians. And so this is why we're talking about growing in wisdom. We're talking about growing graciously in the seasons of life. You got to deal with the issues of kids and not lose your marriage in the midst of that. And so that's very, very important. And so this is not an inclusive list. There's other areas, but we, for the sake of time, these are the big areas. There's probably some other big ones that I missed, but these are the big ones that constantly you see people dealing with in life. So are there any questions to this point? Because we're going to take a little bit of a turn here, stay on the same train of thought, but a little different area. Rose?
If we have a couple in our lives where it's obvious that type of stuff's going on, anger, bitterness, is there any way we need to help them?
Not without them asking. All you'll be doing is interfering, and unsolicited advice is rarely heeded. All you can do is pray. But you can't, you can't fix it, because you're not, unless you move in with them, which would be weird. You can't be there to monitor everything. You wouldn't know. And so, unless they're coming to you for advice, then and not much you can do other than pray. That's all, that's, Savior's above our pay grade. So I'm. Okay, so finally, what I want to then just touch on real quick, there's two scriptures we're going to get. Proverbs 17 and verse 6. Who would get that real quick? Have I scared you all? Proverbs 17:6. Jeremy, and Deuteronomy 4 and verse 9. Sawyer. Okay. So, outside of extreme situations, once your children are gone, you're going to really enter into one of the great, great joys of life, which eventually is going to be called grandchildren. And in that, your relationship, yes. See, all the grandparents would be like, yes. Eventually what happens in life is, they marry, they go on, but your relationship with your children changes now. And as you were teaching them when they were little, as you were dealing with them when they were in their teenage years, and not letting them get away with the things they shouldn't get away with, and covering up and justifying their sin, now they're adults. Now they're on their own. And it's not like you won't get advice, ask for advice every once in a while. Just real recently, my daughter and son-in-law asked me for some advice, and I was like, wow, yeah, they hadn't asked me for a while on a specific situation, and unfortunately, I had to do a little bit with laws in Holland, which are a little bit different than the United States, so couldn't really, help them out a lot there. But what happens, and now at that season of life, as life becomes more about just a friendship relationship than any kind of parent-child relationship, although that will always be there. But now it's just maintaining that relationship, maintaining kind of the flow. But my kids both live very far away. My son's in Florida, our daughter is in Holland, but we talk to them constantly. My son will call when he gets home from work. We get to see our grandson there. My daughter will call when the kids come home from school. It's usually right around our breakfast time, and so we're able to chat with the kids real quick, find out how their day is. So we're able to maintain a relationship with them. Because one great thing about grandparents is you get to spoil them without having to always discipline them. Proverbs 17, verse 6.
Children's children are the crown of an old man, and the glory of children is their father.
So a child looks up to their parents, their father. Their mom's the safety net, dad's the Superman and all that, and that's in a child. That's going to be something there. But the glory now of a grandparent is going to be that grandchild. It's said, and there are funny sayings, grandchildren are the reward of not killing your teenagers when they deserved it. Grandchildren are so good. If I knew they were this good, I would have skipped children, gone straight to grand. All these kinds of sayings. Well, those are based in some kinds of reality because it's such a great joy. Such a great, great joy. And your role changes. Your role now is very different. And so you still have the opportunity to teach not only your children by example, but also your grandchildren. And that's found Deuteronomy 4 and verse 9.
Only be careful and watch yourselves closely so that you do not forget the things your eyes have seen, or let them fade from your heart as long as you live. Teach them to your children and to their children after them.
children after them, grandchildren, even great-grandchildren, I suppose. But the picture there is just your relationship with your children and your family changes. And it really is a very wonderful time of life that you have. You get to spoil a little bit. You get to mock. I've shared with you the root beer float story of my mother giving my son a root beer float for breakfast. And me getting angry because I never got a root beer float for breakfast, you know, because she was mom and now she's grandma. Right? It's just my granddaughters were at school. They were doing some kind of sale promotion, and they said, "You go ask your parents if they have money for this," and whatever it was. And they began to explain that no, they should ask their grandpa, their papa. He lives in America. He would do it, and because those girls know. They just turn on the charm and Papa melts. And so just the reality of the changing roles. It's going to change with your children now. You didn't want your mother-in-law, father-in-law interfering in your marriage. Why would you want to interfere in your children's marriage? Why would you want? So 3 rules, and I close with this, that you need to be wise at once your children get to that place. Don't speak ill of their spouse. He wasn't worthy of you anyway. That may be true. She may have chosen really, really, really poorly. But you reinforcing that is not going to be healthy. Because what's going to happen when they reconcile? Do you know what mom was saying about you? Well, you know what? Let's cut mom off. And I've seen this, and it's not wise. It's not wise to speak ill of your in-laws, your daughter-in-law, your son-in-law. They're not good enough, they're not this, they're not that. Even if it's true. Not wise. Second thing that you need to kind of distance yourself from them is don't be their counselor either. They want advice. Like I said, my son-in-law called me. It was a financial thing. It was a car thing. It was like, yeah, I don't know the lemon laws. I don't know the laws of Holland. I can't tell you what exactly to do. My suggestion is you call a lawyer. They did. And that was great. And marriage advice, I do not give to either one of my kids. I'll recommend a book. It's about as deep as it will go. Here, read this book. Invest in it. I'm not their counselor because I'm already jaded. I'm already going to take a side. And it might not even be my biological child side. You're being a jerk right now. You know, it's like, so too close. Not the one. You should recommend they go speak to someone else, especially if there's history that maybe you haven't had all the best advice throughout the years to apply to your own marriage. Be wise for you to point them to someone else who can help them a little bit more. And then the third area is be careful about supporting them financially. That, you know what, struggle isn't bad. Now, that does not to say that you can't help them, but don't make them dependent on you. Right? Mom and dad are not spelt ATM, and so you have to put that aside and understand, you know what, that's not what I need to do. That, you know what, maybe if they struggle a little bit, that's going to be good for them. I had a lawyer in Lithuania. He worked for the top law firm. He ended up representing me in a small case because he spoke English. And I knew a guy who knew, you know, our neighbor was, her uncle owned the law firm. I mean, literally, they were across the street from the Supreme Court. Like, literally across the street. So, we were talking with them. We got very friendly with them, and through this time, and we had gone out to dinner and such with him and his wife, and they were funny and such. And he said, you know, when we were young and just just coming out of school and didn't have any money, we took vacations, but it was like, you know, we drove 16 hours to go here, and we, you know, stayed in a, you know, back room of someone's house. This was before the Airbnb, you know, kind of thing. And the Eastern Europe did this a lot. We'd go down to the beach there. We'd be packing a lunch because we couldn't afford restaurants. And now he makes top dollar. Now he could fly anywhere in the world. He could, you know, get top, you know, a really successful lawyer. And he says, but you know what? It was those times that built almost sometimes better memories, that brought us closer. And so struggle is not always bad. So if you're helping them out all the time, if they're dependent on you, that's probably not healthy. I understand setbacks. I understand they want to buy a house and you're going to help them with that, or you're going to bless them with new windows and doors or whatever in their new house, whatever it might. That's a different story than a permanent, always crisis to crisis to crisis to crisis kind of time. It's not healthy. So you have to then let them move on. You had to go through some of it. It's not bad that they do as well. Any questions or comments? Okay, so next week we're going to wrap this up. We're going to look at one more, which I'm simply going to entitle The Golden Years, but this is also going to be the things you need to do in your late, they shouldn't be put off, but they have to be done, such as will and estate and life, and we'll look at it all next week, but we're going to look at some of those kinds of issues that need to be addressed. Any questions or comments before we dismiss? Rose?
I'm sure this would never happen to any of the families who go here, but when I was a kid, my parents hated each other, and they always had to tell me behind each other's backs how much she is this, she's like that, he's this, he's this. So by the time I was 14, I wanted to do suicide because I'm like, I'm a little bit like each of these people, so I guess neither one of them really likes me. So if you really want to do a lot of damage to your kids, just talk behind your fuss back to your kids, and you'll drive them crazy.
It's true. Absolutely true.
So I'm sure none of our families here.
Let's pray. God bless you. We'll pick this up next week.